right now I think it's a fun time to kind of look around and say, all right, let's do a sim. Let's do this lottery sim. Let's see where the teams fall, and then let's see what we think about each of the prospects, each of the spots. We'll be getting into a little bit of the advanced analytics, but mostly just fit, thoughts about their game at the next level, and how they've been doing in their college career so far. So if we sim the lottery, we have almost a scratch. Okay, you want to talk about a scratch? The three worst teams in basketball in terms of record get the top three picks. Number one, Darryn Peterson goes to the Sacramento Kings. This is, to me, the dream spot for Darryn Peterson. He's a guy who needs to get his shots off in mass. You know, we've seen him play less minutes, and in that time, he's still been really efficient. So I go off his per 36 a lot. You know, when you shoot 38% on a projected 9 threes a game, he's really only at about 7, but that's not nothing at all. It's pretty damn good for a college player who's gotten a lot of flack. He's a really, really quality scorer. I mean, we take a look at his draft thoughts. I mean, just insane efficiency, you know, insane impact, going to be a great shooter at the NBA level, and can really, really score at all levels. You know, at all levels of the court, he's really impressed me as a scorer. You'd like to see a little more on the assist side, but he's a shooting guard, and I think that's what he'll be at the next level. He may revolutionize the way we look at shooting guards a little bit. I'm not really worried about the minutes thing at the next level. I know some people will be. I'm personally not. I wouldn't blame a GM for being. I don't know Darryn Peterson. I don't know what goes into his mind. I don't know how that stuff works, but I do know that he's a really, really good basketball player, and the tape shows it. You know, I'm worried a little bit. He goes 3 for 18 against Arizona State. You know, he struggled against Houston, which is a really good defense, but I've liked what I've seen from him more than I haven't. Sacramento's a spot that's lacking a lot of foundation. You know, they're looking for guys to shoot the ball. They're going to try to usher out, you know, that era of DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. So it's a very, very good spot for Darryn Peterson. I won't fully go into the way I think Darryn Peterson will be used in the league, but, you know, such a quality scorer, you have to give credit where credit's due, and then this is the easy pick if Sacramento gets first overall. Second, you have AJ Dybantsa to these Brooklyn Nets. AJ Dybantsa, he's the prototype. Really, he's the prototype of the modern day NBA player. 6'9", can do a whole bunch on the court. I was worried early in the year about his efficiency, and I've been completely proven wrong. 52% from the field, 35% from three is really fantastic, to be completely honest. You watch his game, he takes a lot of those mid-range shots, and he's had a lot more weight on him on this BYU team since the injury of Richie Saunders. They haven't been all that great of an offense, obviously slouching a little recently, but there's a chance for AJ Dybantsa to use this, you know, kind of as fuel to the proverbial fire, and how he's going to move forward and be a better scorer. I'm not worried about him at the next level. You see almost 120 offensive rating is really, really good on 61% true shooting. Yeah, that's a lot to be excited about. I think Dybantsa has room to work on his defensive side. His defensive rating hasn't been that great, as proved by this stat weakness. And turnovers isn't a thing that I worry about too much for him. There's a lot of turnovers at the next level. I think that's something that comes with age and time and comfort. So not worried about Dybantsa. When you talk about the spot, I like it a lot. I enjoy this spot for AJ Dybantsa. I think both Darryn and AJ, they kind of need to be the guy in my eyes. I've run other sims where AJ Dybantsa is going to a spot like Washington, you know, or a spot like Dallas, and I don't like it as much because I feel like they need to be the guy. That's something that I think AJ Dybantsa could get a great chance to do in a spot like Brooklyn or Utah are the two spots I'm looking for him to kind of be the guy going forward. And for the Brooklyn spot, there's not much to say, you know, about the Brooklyn Nets. So I'll keep it short and tight. But if he can be the guy, and if they can surround him with some decent shooting pieces and better bigs than they have now, you know, I don't think Michael Porter Jr. is the future. You'd like to think they hit on one of those draft prospects they got last year. I'm fairly confident that one of them figures it out, whether it be Igor Demon, Danny Wolf-Bensroffer, or other. I think that team has a lot of room to figure it out, and no real timetable. You know, there's no rush for the Nets to be competitive. And that's a good thing for AJ Dybantsa, who will be, notches under 20 on his NBA debut. And you look at that for all these freshman guys. So a lot of time, a lot of space, a lot of room to go for Dybantsa. And that's a good thing. On the flip side, you have Cameron Boozer going number 3 to a Pacers team that would have absolutely scammed the Los Angeles Clippers. The way those pick protections work, if you're not aware, is if the Pacers fall in the top 4, they keep their pick that they were originally going to trade for Ivica Zubac. There are other complications. I don't know if they get the first next year. I don't know how that works. But with this insane draft class, they probably don't care. You get a top 4 in this draft class. If they fall out of the top 4 and they fall between 5 and 10, which they are likely to do if they're not in the top 4, obviously, then that pick will fall to the Clippers, and the Clippers get a lot more value than they thought they could have with a guy like Ivica Zubac. So it's fun, it's gambling, it's an interesting thing. There's a larger conversation here about NBA pick protections and how that all works, but we end up with Cameron Boozer at number 3 to the Pacers. So let's dive into Cameron Boozer a little bit. You look at his stat strengths, this is an unbelievable basketball player. And I don't want anyone to think that, he's going number 3, he's not that good. He's first in Tankathon's big board. And this is a guy who's been unbelievable and probably the best team in the nation right now, in my opinion. There are other ways you can think about that, but unbelievably efficient. Ken Palm says he's having one of the best seasons ever. As a basketball player in college basketball. He's up there with the likes of Zach Edey and such. Super duper duper impressive. I mean, shooting 40% from the 3, 10 rebounds a game. Yeah, this is a guy who's 6'9". I'm a little worried about the size thing for Cameron Boozer. That's always been my thing with him, is like he really, really bullies the college level because you kind of can do that at a smaller size. When you get to the next level, you can't do that to quite the same degree. There's a little bit of a difference in the terms of physicality and strength of the guys down low there. So you watch a lot of his tape, it feels a little gimmicky, if you will. I hate to use that term because, again, he's such a fantastic basketball player. And I think the IQ is the big thing with Cam Boozer that pops out for me. He's super, super good with shot selection. You think about 67% true shooting. He's honestly a decent passer. He's impressed me with that. And then the ability to score is something that's often overlooked in this type of thing. He knows how to do it. And I don't want to overrate that, but I also don't want to underrate that. He may not be able to rely on his physicality as much in the next level, but he's really, really skilled, more than a lot of people will tell you. And yes, he's profited off of maybe an easier Duke schedule, obviously playing in the ACC, but it's high-level college basketball nonetheless. I think a lot of what Cameron Boozer remains to be seen is whether or not he can be plugged in super quickly. We've seen other guys similar to Cameron Boozer build not be able to plug in quite as easily as they were in the college level and the pros. You think about Cameron Boozer as the same size as AJ Dybantsa, and it worries you a little bit because he doesn't quite move the same. But again, this is a fantastic basketball player, and when you think about the fit with Indy, you think about Indy getting another guy who can profit down low and maybe eventually take the reins from a guy like Pascal Siakam or Ivica Zubac down the line. As of right now, he'd probably be a higher-end bench player. But my thing for Indiana has always been, don't worry about how is it going to look with one of these draft prospects. With them having that weird pick protection, you can't really rely on that. So in my mind, if you're the Pacers, you're relying on Tyrese Halliburton coming back. You're relying on him gelling with Ivica Zubac. You're relying on keeping Pascal Siakam around. And then you're relying on keeping on growing your other guys. We haven't seen as much growth as I would personally like from Andrew Nembhard. There's more work to be done all around. But if you're the Pacers, I'm not really worried about how this pick slots in. And when you get Cameron Boozer at the 3rd overall pick, he's almost assuredly going to be the Naismith Player of the Year at the college level this year. So you have to just take that. He's going to be just turned 19 when he makes his NBA debut. So, you fall to Cameron Boozer at 3. I have thoughts about Cameron Boozer. If you want to get weird and gadgety with it, I might take someone else at this spot. But he's a really, really good talent, and you have to understand that and take that at what it is. At number 4, we have Caleb Wilson. Caleb Wilson, we just learned, is down for the year after he broke his thumb in practice. A really, really rough end to a year that impressed a ton of people, including myself. Caleb Wilson wasn't a guy who I looked at all. You know, I thought it was the top 3, and then I thought there was a pretty major fall off. But Caleb Wilson's really impressed me. You look at his efficiency. I mean, shooting 58% from the field while only shooting, 26% from the 3. And, not to usher in how much that worries me early, but it does. I need a better shooter than I'm getting out of Caleb Wilson. I need more than what I'm getting from him, and I think that has to come on the defensive end. You look at more than 3 stocks a game is wonderful at the college level. I need to see that at the pro level. In this day and age, you just can't sacrifice that much shooting without being an insane gadget athletic guy on offense, which I think he can be, or an insane wreck on defense, which I also think he can be. So that's where my reliance on Caleb Wilson kind of returns and comes back. I was really, really impressed with some of these early season performances, and even before the injury, I was impressed with the way he was able to carry a lot of weight on this North Carolina team at such a young age. I'm a little worried about how he'll transfer that next level without the shooting, as I talked about. This spot has him going number 4 to the Mavericks. I don't like it. I think you'd like to have a guard here. I'm looking at the guy behind him who we'll talk about in a little bit. But I think you'd kind of rather go guard and usher in the next era after Kyrie. You ship off AD. I just can't really fathom how you believe you're going to compete. Cooper Flag is Cooper Flag, and I don't think the best thing to do is pair him with another wing. With that being said, it's a testament to how good Caleb Wilson has been to kind of usher himself into that, hey, there's a top 4 here. And so I guess if the Mavs do jump this high and jump into the number 4 spot, you're probably pretty happy with getting Caleb Wilson. And I imagine for whatever's left of that regime in Dallas, it's sort of just the idea of, hey, let's take the best player and figure it out later. And I think to some degree Caleb Wilson is that. I said we talk about him. Let's talk about him. Kingston Flemings at number 5, going to the Wizards. It's the spot thing again for me. It's how will he fill in with Trey Johnson and Trey Young. That's I don't mess with that as a point guard room. Kingston Flemings really, really impressed me early in the year with the way he was able to score downhill. You think about 42 against Texas Tech. I was unbelievably taken by the way he played in that game. He's cooled off a little bit as of late. I'm not worried about him. I think he's a guy who has a lot of room to grow. He plays a lot smaller than he is. When I first watched him, I thought he was 6'2", 6'1". He's a 6'4" guard, and he's a guy who I think shoots better than his numbers say. That's not to say his numbers are bad at all, but I think he can be more of a 35% from 3 guy on 5-ish attempts a game. I think that's really good. There's a lot to be said about his defense too. I think that's super, super impressive. Especially for a guard. He's been more gadgety than I think people give him credit for. He's been a better shot creator. He's been a better playmaker than I think people give him credit for. So a lot to like about Kingston Flemings. With that being said, you'd like to see more growth in my eyes. He had this really good stretch during the middle of the season and then just hasn't quite been all the same through the last couple games. This is a guy who I think has a ton to prove in March Madness for a Houston team that also has a ton to prove. So I won't go too much into Kingston Flemings. I don't like the Washington spot. I'll keep that simple. I'll keep that honest. I like Kingston Flemings as a basketball player, but I think there's a lot that remains to be seen about Kingston Flemings. Let's go to number 6 at Keaton Wagler. This is super, super interesting. I haven't seen this in any other sim. The Jazz falling to 6. It's not an insane spot for them to be. I believe they're at the 5th highest odds right now. Keaton Wagler was a guy who I was not high on at all during that first stretch of the season where he really burst onto the scene. I was a little worried about his shot-making ability and his, creation, so to speak. I thought like he looked a little raw, but maybe that's what makes him endearing. For Keaton Wagler, I'm really thinking about that February 1st Nebraska game. That one was unbelievable. It's the peak of Nebraska ball. He goes 4 for 9 from 3, but he also knocks down 10 free throws. He finds different ways to score, which I'm super, super impressed with. He's a guy who wasn't on a lot of radars. He didn't get all that many offers. You think about some of his other best offers behind Illinois with the likes of, DePaul and such. No diss to DePaul. Shout out what Chris Holtman is doing over there. But yeah, this is a guy who's been uber efficient, 42% from the 3. And he's a guy who I can see doing that at the next level because a lot of those are deeper. A lot of those are off the bounce. He's another guy who, similar to Darryn, you're going to see at the 2. I worry about Keaton Wagler getting thrown into the fire of the league, so to speak. I think he would be an unbelievable player if he spent another year at Illinois. I know that's probably not going to happen. In the current day of NIL, you really never know. Keaton Wagler is a guy who's been super, super impressive for me with his shooting and his shooting alone. He's another young guy that's got a really good build. You think of a 6'6" shooting guard. An NBA team would have to do some work on this, and I don't know if Utah's the spot for that. Keontae George has impressed me a lot, and I think there's something to be said about what they're doing over there in Utah that could be said as right. Keaton Wagler, just to me, is a guy who I would like to see plugged into a team that has more form, so to speak. I don't really know what I mean by that, but I've liked what I've seen from Keaton Wagler. And I can't say I've watched all that much Utah Jazz basketball this year, so I can't speak to the fit all that much. But Keaton Wagler, super, super efficient. Remains to be seen how he'll play at the next level. I struggle to see how he'll do against bigger physicality. But Keaton Wagler, unbelievable player. 7, Nate Ament. I'm really low on Nate Ament. I just don't think he translates to the next level. To me, he feels like a college guy. Maybe I'm a hater, maybe I'm missing the bottom line. But when you shoot 41% from the field in college, I'm never going to be super high on you. 17 points a game is fine. This Tennessee team has been a little confusing all year. Obviously, recent losses to Missouri and Alabama. I don't know if there is news on Nate Ament and any of his injury or availability things. So Nate Ament, he rolled his ankle recently. He's a guy to me who needed a really big March to prove to me that he can be in this sort of top echelon. This draft is just so unbelievably deep to me that I struggle to find how Nate Ament fits in here. And not to mention on the dumpster fire that is the Atlanta Hawks. I don't fully mean that. I think the Hawks have some semblance of form. And I think they're building something over there that they like. But I'm not a big Nate Ament guy. And I look at the 4 to 5 guys after him, and I'm pretty big on most of them. Speaking of guys I'm big on, Darius Acuff is, in my mind, the best pure point guard in this class. And I don't say that lightly, but you think of a John Calipari point guard who will be under 20 years old upon his NBA debut. He's averaging insane stats this year if you think about counting numbers and efficiency too. 44% from the 3 on almost 6 attempts a game. He's getting a ton of minutes and super, super high usage. But 22 points a game, he had some unbelievable performances, including 49 versus Alabama. You go and watch the tape of that game, he really just looks effortless. He looks like an NBA player playing at the college level. And that's kind of all you need to know about him. There's plenty of prowess there with his assist numbers and the way he's able to play make for his teammates. I think there's a lot to be desired on the defensive end of the ball, but I'm not sure anyone in the NBA cares about defense anymore. He's got a decent build. He's 6'3", almost 200 pounds. This is a guy who's just a dog. He's just a dog. He hasn't struggled with the turnover problem. Arkansas plays a super, super fast brand of basketball. He hasn't struggled, with the efficiency. He hasn't struggled with the turnover numbers, and those are things that you look at on those high-paced offenses that you worry about sometimes. This has him going to Memphis. I like this spot if they're thinking about ushering out the John Morant era and ushering in a new one. Darius Acuff is an unbelievable basketball player. He really takes, he takes incredible care of the shots that he chooses I can't speak enough about his on the ball, but also his off the ball. You think about moving off the ball. This feels like a guy who can create his own shot no matter who's defending him. I don't think he's a guy who'll take that much time to readjust at the NBA level at all. And I think number 8 to the Grizzlies is a really, really good spot for him. At number 9, you got Mikel Brown Jr. Mikel Brown Jr. is a guy who I haven't watched all that much of. You think about his injury issues at the start of the year. I went to Louisville versus Cal kind of wishing to watch him. I didn't see him. He didn't play in that game. He missed a lot of that early January, late December time. And since returning, he's been pretty good. Really, really good performance against NC State. Some not so good ones, recently against Clemson. Less than ideal performance on 25 shots against North Carolina. There's a lot to be desired in Mikel Brown's game. He was obviously the number 8 player in his class and a top point guard in this one. He's a good shooter. He's not a great shooter. I think he's got a really nice handle, which is really cool. He's 6'5", which is also great. I think he's a guy who could become more of a contact seeker. I think that would be a big progression to his game that could be beyond helpful. The spot to the Bulls, to me, the Bulls are similar to some of these other spots where you're kind of just looking for the best player. And that's sort of what you get out of Mikel Brown Jr. If I'm the Bulls, I'm really hoping that Flemings, Wagler, or Acuff fall to you. That didn't happen in this sim. It may not happen in real life. I think if the Bulls jump up here, there's a lot to be excited about. Just to me, at this number 9 line, if you look at Philon behind him, you look at Burries and Steinbach, I'm just not all that excited about what I'm seeing. So you're fine with Mikel Brown Jr., and if you feel like you can grow him into something bigger than he is now, he could be unbelievable. Problem is I don't believe in the Bulls to do that all that much, so a little confused with this pick. Finally, at 10th, you have Labaron Philon. We'll have to go through the full lottery at a later date. Maybe we'll schedule that in for post-March Madness. Labaron Philon has been super good. He's impressed me in his sophomore year. You think about a guy who averages nearly 40% from the 3, but only 50% from the field. I think he needs to find a more defined role. Alabama plays at an unbelievably fast rate. So I think there's a lot to be liked about the way he's been able to control that offense. My worries there are how will he do it at the next level. He doesn't exactly play a role. I haven't loved the way he moves off the ball. I don't like his defense. I think he's got a fine build. 6'4" is good for a point guard. But if you're going to be a true point guard, I kind of need to see more on the assisting side of the ball. He was in draft talks last year. He's undoubtedly a scorer. I'll obviously give him that, as I should. But, I worry a little bit about how he's going to play make at the next level. And I think this 10th spot to Milwaukee is a decent one. This team needs weapons and guys that have the capability to do it at the next level and do it at a high level. And I think Labaron Philon is that. Finally, just a couple shouts. I know I said I was only going to do 10. But I can't speak without talking about the guys that I like right now. I think some of the gadgety shooters that I like right now, I think Bennett Sturritz could make a really good shooter at the next level. I think the same about Braylon Mullins and Braden Burries. Braden Burries is a guy to me who should be taken over Labaron Philon and Mikel Brown Jr. I know people like those point guards who can do it all with the ball in their hands. Braden Burries has done, in my mind, a lot with a lot less. He's been overshadowed by some of his Arizona teammates, but he's been unbelievable this year on an Arizona team that's doing really, really good things. Also, credit to Haynes Steinbach. Haynes Steinbach has here going 12th of the Thunder. I think that'd be really scary because he's a guy who can plug in, I believe, right now and be a quality NBA player while only being 20 years of age upon his NBA debut. You think about them drafting Thomas Sorber last year, that'd be an insane spot. And then finally, my flowers to Yaxel Lendenborg. He's the ultimate guy of staying in college and growing your game. You saw him at UAB. He stayed in college, could have probably gone early second round, late first last year. He's now jumped into the lottery with his fantastic year at Michigan. I don't have many worries for him translating to the next level. Yaxel Lendenborg is a super, super insane talent and a testament of this sort of new brand of basketball where guys can be really, really good even if they stay 4 years in college. So that's all from me. Thanks for tuning in. This was our top 10 walking through. Again, we'll have to do more once March wraps up, but let's not skip to then. Enjoy the college basketball. A lot of this is just for fun. I don't mean any ill will against any of these guys. I want them all to succeed, and they're all just such fantastic talents that we really can't take this for granted. So fun to see how they match up with their teams. So yeah, enjoy March, guys. Thanks for watching.